Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of E&Ftv. Today, we are joined by the brilliant Oliver Ranson, who is the Managing Director at Ranson Pricing Limited. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Tom. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's obviously been we've known each other for a few years now. You attended obviously an event that I hosted a while back, so it's great to actually get you on the show because we're going to be actually discussing something that we haven't discussed on the show before, and that's sort of the airline side of things, what's been going on over there and so on. I suppose a really good place to start would be to understand your background, how you discovered revenue management, and I suppose what brought you to starting your own consultancy business as well.
Show me the money. That's the tagline from the hit Hollywood film Jerry Maguire, and it's also the right mindset that you need to be a successful revenue manager in today's world. And I came to the airline industry, my home industry in revenue management, having indeed shown the airlines the money as a passenger. I'd been flying around the world to deliver consulting projects on behalf of my employer at the time. And of course, when you get on the plane and you fly to all these exciting places, you've got to spend some money to do that. But when I was taking these flights, I thought to myself, well, this is really exciting. You know, there are people like me going around to do projects, to see friends and family, to change the world, to make the world a better place, to provide economic growth and power the wheels of commerce. And so I thought that this is an industry that I want to get involved in. So I applied speculatively to a job at an airline I'd heard good things about called Qatar Airways in Doha. And believe it or not, they actually had me. So I went along to interview, spent a day with them. And then on the 1st of September 2007, I flew out to join the company. And when I arrived at Qatar Airways Tower in Doha, I went to the second floor and I was told, well, the thing is, Oliver, that we don't really have a job for you, but we do like you. So here's a desk, here's a computer, here's a telephone. Try and make us some money. You're sitting in a place called the Revenue Management Department. Well, 5 years later, I'd grown their revenue by $300 million and was sitting in a little office on the CEO's floor. And I thought to myself, well, I could do all this as an independent advisor. So on the 30th of November 2012, 5 years and 3 months after joining the airline, I flew back to the UK and started emailing airline CEOs. It wasn't long until I was on the plane to South Africa to do my first project down in Johannesburg with Comair, who operate Kulula.com and the British Airways franchise in sub-Saharan Africa. That was a revenue management transformation project. We had a good time. And ever since then, I've been going strong, working with both airlines and suppliers to figure out how they can get passengers to show them the money.
Fantastic, fantastic. And obviously, we sort of caught up a few years ago, and now you've got a very well-established team. Things are obviously looking up, and obviously there's a lot of exciting stuff going on with you guys. So it's, as I said to you the other day when we caught up, it's really great to see how the business has obviously grown to where it is now. So I suppose congratulations on that. And am I thinking rightly that you're actually celebrating sort of the birthday of the business as well? Is that right? Very recently?
That's right, Tom. Effective the 1st of September, I'm celebrating 13 years in the airline business. And on the 1st of December this year, my company will be celebrating 8 years trading as an independent consultant.
Fantastic, fantastic. It was actually my birthday last week, so that's a little one for me, but very big birthdays for you. But no, that's, you know, it's all good stuff, and it's obviously great to catch up with you now. I suppose some of the talking points that obviously we've spoken about in the past have been looking at, well, I suppose seeing things differently. Now, one of the big ones that you've sort of mentioned is actually looking at the product rather than the distribution. So, you know, it'd be interesting for me, and I suppose our audience, to hear what your thoughts are on that.
As revenue managers, I think it's really important that we understand how our passengers and our guests feel about using the products and the services that we supply. And if as revenue managers we're never actually flying on the planes, or staying in the rooms, or swimming in the pool, or eating in the restaurant, how can we truly understand how those people who are providing our livelihoods and supporting our business value what we have to give them? And this is what revenue management is really. It's sharing the value so that the people who come and fly on our airplanes or stay in our hotel receive value from that. And it's only fair that they should share that with us. As revenue managers, we try and capture a higher share of that value as possible. And I think that the key to success here is really thinking like a passenger or thinking like a guest. And if we can find ways of understanding how the different products that our airline or our hotels offer to the people who use them, that's a good way of unlocking the value and giving people an incentive to share it with us. So, for example, if you're running a 5-star hotel and you've got a choice between a kind of emperor-sized bed and a king-sized bed, presumably the emperor-sized bed comes with penalties in respect of space and cost. But maybe people are willing to spend a little bit more money to stay in a room that has an emperor-sized bed. And if you've slept in an emperor-sized bed yourself as a revenue manager, maybe it's easier to understand that value than if you never have. So it's good to spend time on observation flights or observation nights. If you're staying in a hotel that has a beautiful beach or a swimming pool or fantastic leisure facilities, what is the purpose of these as relevant to the people who actually stay in the hotel? Is it just about fitness? Or is it about recreation? Is it about aspiration? Is it about spending time with your family and friends together in an environment that's fun and relaxing? Because each of these different sort of market segments have different willingness to pay and use different services that the hotel or the airline provides. So if I'm a revenue manager in a hotel and my hotel is considering that we've got a certain amount of money this year to invest in improving our leisure facilities, should I invest in a spa with a steam room, plunge bath, massage facilities and so on? Or should I spend the extra money on adding some tennis courts to the garden? Or should I spend the extra money putting a jacuzzi in next to the outdoor swimming pool? Each of these things potentially have very real implications for the hotel's revenue. Because if you've got tennis courts and you don't have them before, then you can attract people who like to play tennis, either when they're traveling on business or on leisure. If you've got a spa and you never had one before, you should be able to monetize that. You should be able to attract new people to your hotel, and you should be able at the same time to encourage some people who would stay at the hotel anyway to pay a little more because you're offering a bit more value to them. And it's exactly the same in the airline business. If you've got a flat bed in your business class cabin, and say, for example, the bed is 6 foot long, 72 inches, that is pretty standard. But what happens if you increase the length of the bed by 6 inches, so it becomes 78 inches? Well, there are penalties in respect of weight and space and cost of the seat, but how much extra can you sell it for? This is the sort of problem that my team have been working with airlines to solve. And I think that once you find the right balance between product quality and customer expectations in terms of the service they require and the value that they get from using your airline or your hotel to support their travel, then you can make much more suitable and robust revenue management decisions.
I suppose it all comes down to truly understanding your product, but also your client. And as you say, if you're not actually experiencing it for yourself, maybe, how can you really expect to do that, I suppose? Is that sort of the right way to think about it then?
Absolutely. In normal times, pre-COVID, and I'm sure post-COVID as well, airlines like British Airways might have 10 or 12 or more flights a day to New York. And on those flights, there will be tickets priced in business class at $10,000 or $15,000. And in first class, there will be flights priced at $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000. And I guarantee you that no revenue manager at British Airways ever, in the entire history of the airline, has ever spent between $10,000 and $25,000 of their own post-tax money on such a seat. So they have to experience the product like a passenger, like a regular fare payer, to understand its true value. Because when an airline staff member travels, they're just so glad to get the seat in business class or premium economy, and that it's not a jump seat without even in-flight entertainment or the ability to recline. They're so glad to get that seat that they never think about why somebody would pay a large amount of money for it. And if we as airlines and hotels can encourage our staff to use the product just like a regular traveler does, without the penalties that a regular staff member has on duty travel, then we can encourage our staff to understand the product, and ultimately they'll price it better. It's not just a matter of experiencing the product, there's also the loyalty aspect. Quite why airlines and hotels don't yet have loyalty programs for staff, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there's a great opportunity there for revenue managers and loyalty professionals to work together to help each other understand the market, to experience the loyalty themselves, and develop products that capture revenue from guests or passengers, not just today, but over the years to come.
Definitely, definitely. And anybody that's obviously watching this, please do comment down below if you do have thoughts with regards to, I suppose, loyalty programs and how they could be utilized by a revenue management team. Whether that be obviously an airline, but of course, obviously the hotel side of things as well.
Of course, that's right, may I, Tom?
Yeah.
Of course, revenue management is a three-sided coin. You've got pricing, you've got demand management and inventory optimization, and then you've got loyalty. And they all have to work together. You can't siloize any of them out. The people who understand pricing must understand loyalty. Those who understand demand must understand pricing, and all the way around. Well, yeah, you get the message.
Yeah, all three sides anyway. In terms of sort of the, I suppose, tech side of things. Now, again, your thoughts on tech in terms of how to utilize, but who to actually use. You know, in your opinion or in your thoughts and insight, what do you think of tech and who we should be using right now?
In the travel industry, we've been using technology since the 1960s, right since the introduction of computers. And that means we've got a lot of experience and a lot of use cases, which is great. But it also means that we've got a lot of legacy platforms and a lot of processes that, quite frankly, are a bit out of date. And it's up to us to be agile and find new solutions that move beyond the legacy technology. So if you're an airline or a hotel or any other travel company looking for new technology, there are three sources that you can go to. The first is the traditional vendors, the traditional GDS suppliers, the traditional revenue management system providers, the traditional revenue integrity system providers. All of these guys will be able to provide you with impressive looking and sounding technology that achieves a lot. There's no doubt a lot of analytical power behind these systems, but because they're based on the old way of doing things, sometimes they can be a bit clunky and hard to use, no matter how well they're packaged. And the airline industry, as I've worked in it, is littered with cases where people have paid the legacy technology companies a lot of money to implement technology that frankly doesn't work. It might well do the job if you have analysts using it who have years of experience developing the software and working with the vendor to implement it. But the reality is that those are not the people who are working on the revenue management floor at airlines or hotels. So be cautious when you're working with a traditional vendor. Most likely you won't get what you think you're paying for as quickly as you might expect. Right. The second source of technology is the startups. And we see a lot of support from airlines and hotel companies to create these type of startup labs, hubs, incubators, whatever you might call them. And there are some great people coming out of these places who are producing technology which can really drive the industry. You know, I'm thinking about people who are redefining the way we forecast demand. I'm thinking about people who are reconsidering the way that passenger experience is communicated to buyers and communicated to people who might not understand so much about what they're getting because they don't fly or stay in a hotel very much and are helped getting an informed choice. I'm talking about people who are putting new platforms into the travel environment like virtual reality and augmented reality. And they're coming out with some truly fantastic ideas that complement the existing travel ecosystem, but don't necessarily replace it. And the great thing about working with these companies is that you can find some innovative ideas, innovative concepts, and some ways of raising revenue. But there is a bit of a bandwagon effect. So, for example, there's a trend in the airline business right now that people say, well, I want to work with a company that allows me to offer my passengers the chance to bid for upgrades to business class or first class. And you can imagine the same thing working in a hotel as well. You know, you're in a standard room and you bid for an upgrade to a suite. Well, that's all well and good. But I would say that what is the purpose of this? If you get your pricing right at the start, you can offer the affordable upgrades for the inventory that would otherwise go unsold as part of your normal day-to-day sales processes. So sometimes these startups are actually not adding so much value to the industry. Sometimes all they're doing is they're making it easy for the people who should be taking decisions about pricing for this month's flights or next month's accommodation packages to offload that decision to the customer. And that's not right. That's not the way we should be doing revenue management. We should be offering prices that are affordable to everybody. We should be simultaneously the cheapest and the most expensive in the market if we're doing our pricing and revenue management well. And sometimes some of these startup solutions create a lot of traction, which I think is simply a bandwagon effect. Airline A gets it because their competitor uses it. Hotel chain B uses it because there's a guy in town who has the same solution, and that's not right. The third source of technology is people who aren't currently offering solutions to the travel industry or are not traditionally associated with the travel industry. So, for example, companies like Google come along and introduce their Google Flights product, which allows airlines to crunch through very complex fare products using computing power that they wouldn't have access to themselves unless they made a tremendous cost. And when it comes to these third-party providers, I think it's up to the airlines, the hotels, and all the other travel service providers to be open to working with new people, to think about new ways of doing things and what can be done using technology that's been developed in other industries as applied to travel. So, for example, we have retailing platforms, we have Amazon, we have Alibaba, and if I'm an airline or a hotel today, what ideas should I be having to work with Amazon or Alibaba to sell my product? Should I be using Alibaba to sell duty-free? Should I be using Amazon to offer my seats to my customers? Should I be selling through channels that I don't normally think about? Should I be selling through video games? Should I be selling through kinds of internet experiences and social media? Should I be making it easy to use artificial intelligence to help sell seats through voice commands? I'm sure that as an airline that all of these things can be done, but what my priorities should be based on a robust understanding of the revenue potential of each of them. And that's where a revenue manager who's imaginative can really come in. Because if you're a creative revenue manager, your skill isn't just setting the prices for rooms or airline seats today. The skill is also to look to the future and think about how you can do this effectively tomorrow. And I would, if I were a revenue manager, try to think carefully about how I can influence my airline, my hotel, or whoever else to buy technology which I think is going to be interesting 10 years from now. Sometimes it can be hard to get the budget to think about these projects. Sometimes it can be hard to find the time. But if we look at revenue and not just cost potential, then we can open up opportunities that the finance director might not otherwise see. Because if through video games we can access 20 million people who wouldn't otherwise be seeing our product, then almost surely some of them will buy. And that's going to result in, say, at least 20 million of profit if it's $1 profit per passenger. It might result in at least $200 million of revenue or $2 billion of revenue if it's $10 or $100 in revenue per viewer. These are significant potentials that do offset the cost of these initiatives. And when a new project is under consideration, we need to consider its revenue potential just as much as cost.
Interesting, really interesting. I suppose in terms of the creativity element, certainly, in terms of revenue managers, especially now more than ever. Creativity is everything. And if your tech can work with you with regards to your creativity, then it just makes your business even stronger, especially obviously your revenue management, but also wider commercial sort of team.
Sometimes I feel, Tom, that as an industry where we struggle is in terms of siloization. So, you've got a tech team and you've got a tactical team, possibly even within the same revenue management department. They have to be talking to each other. They have to be working with each other. The travel companies, which I think are most successful in revenue management, are the ones which have the lowest barriers, the lowest walls, and the least silos.
I think it's an interesting one because we've been actually having quite a lot of conversations on the hospitality side of things anyway, especially on this channel, regarding stopping the silos, having more of a collaborative approach. And it sounds like that's the same with regards to the airline sector as well then.
Absolutely. There's no company more heavily siloized than a legacy airline. And it all comes down to incentives in the management team. Later on in this video, we're going to be talking about the revenue engineering pathway. And that is not just a great way of structuring a career, but also a way of breaking down these silos.
Well, that actually quite nicely brings us on to the next question, which is something that I definitely believe in, which is it's time for a change in terms of the revenue manager and how people can attain that title, but also carry on within their career. And something that you've been sort of talking about for some time, actually, is the revenue management pathway, as you put it. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear what your views are on this. And I know that obviously there's going to be a few people that would be very interested in it.
Tom, I've been in the revenue management business now for 13 years, including 5 years at an airline. And I'm here to tell you that never once in my life, never once was I promoted at work. Not because I didn't know my job or because I wasn't delivering the results, but because, my manager, he was just sticking around. He wasn't going anywhere. And then the manager who was above him, he wasn't going anywhere either. And why would they? Revenue management's great. It's fun. It's well paid, it's exciting, you can deliver results and you can influence the movement of big companies. So I had to move on. I had to become a consultant in order to develop my career. The path up to vice president and chief commercial officer and whatever was blocked because the folks ahead of me were doing great jobs and very happy doing those great jobs in the management positions. And I think there are a lot of people out there in the revenue management business, a bit like me, who sadly don't stay in the business and leave. They go elsewhere, maybe even leaving travel, which means that all of our skills, all of our knowledge and our insights are lost forever, because we've gone off to oil or to retailing or to the public sector, whatever it might be. And as airlines, hotel operators, and other businesses in travel, imagine how much potential there is for us to increase our revenue by retaining all those skills in-house, by incentivizing people to stay, through allowing promotions to technical positions, which I call revenue engineering, without management positions requiring the management of people to be available. Because in any organization, you only need a certain number of managers. Any revenue management department needs a vice president, a couple of directors, some senior managers, and some middle managers too. But that's limited. But they can use an unlimited number of experts. So in the traditional airline, maybe medium-sized to quite large airline has 100 people in their revenue management department, of whom maybe 20 are in the management positions and 80 are in the non-management positions. Well, of those 80 people, probably 60 of them are going to leave the airline at some point in the next 5 years because they can't get promoted into management. But imagine if instead the airline is able to retain many of them through giving them extra pay, extra rewards, extra responsibility by contributing to the business as their skills allow, as they develop those skills in their career. So this is what revenue engineering is all about. It's all about people being able to contribute to the business, to the revenue management team in ways beyond what the traditional analyst would achieve. It's about representing revenue management at other stakeholders in the airline or the hotel, going to the finance department, the sales department, the product department, whoever it might be, and explaining this is how revenue management works, this is how we can help you solve your problems, and this is what we need from you to help solve our problems. That bigger picture responsibility is part of the revenue engineering role. The other big part of it is achieving developments in the technology and the ways of doing things in the revenue management department that the traditional analyst doesn't really have the experience yet to achieve. So developing new processes, new algorithms, applying the underlying mathematics and technology in new ways, working with the vendors to establish what's really needed for my airline or my hotel and not what's in the catalogue, working out how I can really develop my revenue management practice so that it moves towards the state of the art without requiring extensive capital investment and using the resources that we already have. These are the sort of things that a revenue engineer works on. They might participate in the wider industry as well, going to work with the trade bodies, the working groups, and all of the different parts of the industry which help us to move forward. And by having those revenue engineers available, the airline then makes sure that its views are represented. They make sure that the technology that's developed, not just by that airline, but by the whole industry, is responding to their needs. All the while, helping the people, the managers who are responsible for handling the people management side of revenue management are free to do their job. So projects run more smoothly, more efficiently, more creatively, and with ultimately better results.
I was going to say, and not everybody wants to become a people manager, do they? But how does the progression work for somebody that doesn't want to go into management, but they want to increase the complexity of what they're doing, or maybe the scope of where their responsibilities lie? This sort of revenue engineer pathway could open up those doors for people that might not want to go down the operational route.
I think so, and there must be a heck of a lot of people out there who are very highly qualified revenue managers. That doesn't make them good people managers. And there'll be a heck of a lot of very qualified people out there who are probably very good people managers, but who might not have the technical insights required to, or the mathematical understanding required to really contribute to some of the more abstruse and difficult technically parts of the business. So I see the revenue engineering path as working in parallel to the traditional management path. So if you're going to be a revenue engineer, you don't know that when you're 21 or 25 or 30 and you're going into revenue management for the first time. You don't know what that's going to be. You've either taken your undergraduate degree, or you've got some experience working elsewhere in the hotel, or maybe you come from another industry and you're coming into revenue management as a quantitatively inclined individual. Then you don't know whether you're going to be a people manager or a revenue engineer. It's too early. But you come in as an analyst, and then maybe after 2 years you're promoted to a senior analyst, and then 3 years later you have the big question: am I going to be a people manager, or am I going to be a revenue engineer? And if you become a people manager, well, we all understand that. You become a manager, a senior manager, a director, and maybe a vice president. If you're going down the revenue engineering path, then you go from senior manager to, let's call them revenue engineer, and then maybe senior revenue engineer instead of senior manager, lead revenue engineer instead of director, and kind of something like, advisor to the board, or advisor to the management team, or resident expert or something instead of vice president. So you can, as a business, you can reward your top contributors by giving them the pay and benefits of director and vice president level positions without actually needing to have a vacancy in one of those offices. I don't think that there's scope for revenue engineers to necessarily become the senior vice presidents or chief officers of the company, but as non-people managers, I'm not entirely sure they'd want to do that anyway.
Very true. Very true. And again, I think in times like this, where there is just so much disruption, it could open pathways like this, or ideas anyway, at least leading to some sort of open discussion about new ways of doing things. Because just because these are the ways things have always been done, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's still relative to the times. And as I said, I'm a strong believer of it is time for a change. And if the revenue engineer pathway is one of those ways, who knows? It may well be. It may well be. In terms of challenges that you've seen, obviously from the airline side of things, but obviously anything that you foresee from the hospitality side, what have you seen? What have you been seeing from your perspective again in your experience?
Well, Tom, like many people during the lockdown, sometimes I turned on the TV at a time that it wouldn't normally be part of my day-to-day activity. And some of those afternoon quiz shows that are on the BBC or ITV normally have a final round where you play for money. And the host of the quiz will say to you, if you win, if you take the money, what will you do with it? And I guarantee you that on 7 or 8 out of 10 occasions, the contestant will say, I'm going to take a holiday. I think that as people, as humans, we have a fundamental desire for travel. We love to explore. We love to go to new places. We love to have new experiences with our friends and family. And that desire isn't going to go away. So I'm not going to talk about the short-term impacts of COVID or the lockdown and these things because I think that they are short-term. I don't see COVID as a great challenge that the travel industry needs to overcome. I think that some of the statements that have been made about precautions for health and such are a bit over the top, and I don't see these as workable long-term solutions. Fundamentally, people are going to get on the move again. They're going to be happy to fly. They're going to be happy to stay in hotels when the time is right. So I see the challenges as how can we, first of all, encourage people to realize that the time to travel is now? How can we help people to realize that there are great opportunities? And that's very simple. Once a market is open, once a government allow people to come in without a visa, once the hotels are open, once the restaurants are open, price alone is a good mechanism. We can offer deals, promotions, and incentives that encourage people to get on the move again. And these don't necessarily have to be price discounts. There are other ways that the airlines and the hotels can innovate. So, for example, if you come and stay at our hotel, you get a free breakfast. If you use our airline, you get a free access to the business class lounge if you're an economy passenger who pays more than $1,000 for the whole ticket. And if you're a business class passenger, you get a free upgrade to the first class lounge. Not necessarily an upgrade to first class on board the plane, but that doesn't matter. It's an upgrade to the upgrade in the lounge experience, or the experience which is easy to provide, which is possible to provide due to relatively lower demand. And it gives people a little chance to say, well, hey, that sounds great. That sounds interesting. I'd like to do that. That sounds fun. Let's go ahead and do it. So that's the first one, finding innovative ways of getting people back on board the plane or back into the hotel, often focusing on product. The second challenge, I think, is in terms of how we design new products that are appropriate for emerging markets. So we're seeing a lot of change in the world right now. We're seeing the traditional industries move to home working. We're seeing traditional travel patterns disappear, but new ones will emerge to take their place. And they're not necessarily going to be Western or traditional in their focus. So I think as an industry, we need to focus a lot more on what's going to work in new markets. What is the right way of doing revenue management in China? What is the right onboard product and service in terms of galley configuration, for example, for a Latin American airline? How can an airline which is based in Africa use commercial strategies based on mobile technology in a way that wouldn't work in the West, but might be very successful there? These are the sort of questions that as an industry we need to be answering, and which are going to require collaboration between the revenue people and the product people. And then the third big challenge is how can airlines and travel companies work together to share the value that they create through the entire travel ecosystem. An airline is delivering a passenger to a hotel, and competition in the airline industry is so intense that the airlines can be making a loss on that route, while the person who's traveling is prepared to spend hundreds of dollars per night in the hotel, but only $20 on the airfare. So as an industry, airlines, hotels, rental car and crews need to work together to create marketplaces that support one another. Imagine if I could go onto an airline website today and buy a flight which didn't just come with the traditional travel package. It doesn't just come with a hotel and a rental car, but it also comes with meals in an interesting restaurant, a trip to the local bazaar, a bungee jump over the waterfall or the canyon, a ride in a fast car around the local racing track, any other travel product that you can imagine. Then the airline could be taking commission from each of these operators, a relatively small amount of commission, but which would nevertheless add up to big money for the airline. So instead of receiving $20 or $30 for their seat, they could be receiving $60, $90, or even more than $100 for their seat, while the individual vendors are paying the airline only $1 or $2 from a margin of 20 or 30 for their product. This is going to help make the industry more profitable as a whole. It's going to help the airlines supply the vendors in each marketplace. It's going to help the airlines bring in passengers who might not otherwise come. And it's going to eliminate the fierce and difficult competition in the airline industry based around benchmarking my competitor. Because if I'm not the best airline at selling seats, but I'm the best airline at selling bungee jumping, restaurant meals, and adventurous trips in cars, then I can collect $100 in revenue from the passenger, even if I charge nothing for the seat. Meanwhile, my competitor, who's worrying only about the price of the seat, is going down to $20 or $30 for the seat, and they're making a loss. I've moved on. And if I were an airline right now, this is the challenge that I'd be trying to solve.
Interesting. It's great, obviously, the sort of three challenges, but also three almost speculative solutions. And again, it's one of these things where the industry does need to get more creative. It needs to get more innovative, and it needs to start thinking about the wider and more ancillary businesses that could be coming in. And obviously those revenue streams, no matter how small they might seem, as you said, as a collective or over the long period, it turns into big money. Well, Oliver, thank you so much for obviously taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. I want to thank you very much for your time. I hope obviously you've enjoyed being on E&Ftv, but obviously that is yet to be seen.
Well, it's great to be on. Thank you very much, Tom. And I think that in order to conclude, we need to go back to where we started, because it's all about showing airlines the money. So all together now, show me the money.
Well, thanks very much, Oliver, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure you see who's on next week's episode now.